I'm a 27-year-old woman, married to my 26-year-old husband for 4 years. Our relationship has mostly been good, and we've shared a lot of love and happiness together. In the beginning, our connection both emotionally and physically was amazing. We felt a strong bond and enjoyed being with each other in every way. When it came to intimacy, I had more experience than he did, and we both knew that. I would often tell him how great he was, thinking it would make him feel good about himself. I believed that being encouraging and complimentary would boost his confidence, and it seemed to work back then. He responded well to it, and it made our connection feel even stronger. For the most part, there were no major problems in our relationship. We got along well, enjoyed each other's company, and handled life's challenges as a team. Even in the bedroom, things were mostly smooth, though the passion gradually faded over time. I thought that was normal in long-term relationships. I never felt unhappy about our intimate life, and I assumed he felt the same way. But recently, I noticed a change in him. He became distant and seemed distracted during our intimate moments. Even though he always made sure my needs were met, I could tell he wasn't really enjoying himself anymore. At first, he would say he was just tired, but that excuse stopped making sense after a while. I knew something deeper was going on. Eventually, we decided to have a long, open conversation about it. He acted like he was doing it just for me, but I could sense he was holding back. I pressed him for the truth, and he finally confessed that he had a fetish, something he had never mentioned before. At first, I misunderstood what he was saying. I thought he was accusing me of cheating on him. I immediately assured him that I had never been unfaithful, but he explained that it wasn't about that. He told me that he had developed a fantasy about me being with another man. He clarified that he knew I hadn't cheated, he just found the idea thrilling. This revelation left me feeling confused and uneasy. I tried my best to understand his point of view, but the thought of him wanting me to be with someone else made me feel sick. Despite my discomfort, I wanted to support him. So, we talked about how we might include this fantasy in our relationship in a way that could make him feel fulfilled. Now that everything was out in the open, he seemed genuinely excited. He even suggested that we find a friend who would join us so he could watch. That idea was a complete non-starter for me. The thought of being intimate with another man, especially someone we both knew, made me deeply uncomfortable. I couldn't wrap my head around his desire, and I definitely didn't want to go through with it. After I turned down the idea, he came up with a different suggestion. He thought it might work if I simply told him stories about my past experiences with other partners. He wanted to hear about how they compared to him. At that moment, I considered lying to him, but I decided to tell him that he was the most fulfilling relationship I'd ever had. Surprisingly, he seemed a little disappointed by my answer. I wasn't sure what to make of that, but we kept discussing the issue. Eventually, we reached a compromise. He asked if I would have a one-night stand with a stranger just to fulfill his fantasy. I wasn't happy about it, but I could see how excited he was at the idea. I thought that maybe just talking about it would be enough for him and that we'd never actually go through with it. But I was wrong. He kept bringing it up until the day finally arrived. That night, I dressed up in a way I hadn't in years, trying to play the part. My husband was thrilled when I left the house, thinking his fantasy was about to come true. I went to a bar in a nearby town, far enough that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. As I walked in, my stomach was in knots, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something terribly wrong. I started drinking, hoping it would numb my guilt, but it only made me feel worse. Men approached me, but I couldn't engage with any of them. Normally, the attention would have been flattering, but in this situation, it only made me feel more miserable. I realized that I couldn't go through with it. I had no intention of cheating on my husband, even if he thought he wanted me to. After drinking more than I should have, I called a cab and went to a friend's house. She could tell something was wrong, but I didn't share the details. I just told her I needed a place to crash for the night. The next morning, I went home to my husband, unsure of what to say. He assumed that I'd gone through with the plan, and he was overjoyed. He told me how much he appreciated what he thought I'd done for him, and I didn't have the heart to correct him. I played along, even criticizing him a little to match his expectations. He was thrilled, and our intimacy improved immediately after that. It seemed like this lie had brought us closer, even though it made me uncomfortable inside. Now he's suggesting that I go out and do it again, believing that since I've done it once, it should be easier the next time. But I know I won't go through with it. I'll probably do the same thing, go to a bar, drink too much, and end up at a friend's house. I don't want to tell anyone close to me about this, which is why I'm sharing it online. The strangest part is that I'm not as bothered by the idea of lying to him again. I know he's excited by the fantasy, but I have no intention of actually cheating on him. It feels like the lie is a way to keep both of us happier. Story 2. I'm a 35-year-old man, married to my wife, who is 36. We've been together for 10 years, and our marriage has been full of changes and challenges. We come from different countries and have lived in several places around the world, partly because of my job. We both speak each other's native languages, which has helped us connect in many ways over the years. We also have 3-year-old twins who have been a big part of our lives since they were born. However, things have become difficult between us, especially in the past few years. Our relationship has lost some of the closeness we used to have, and our intimacy has almost disappeared. Since the birth of our twins, we've only been intimate a few times. In the past year, we've had sex twice and shared oral intimacy only a couple of times. This is a huge change from how things were before we became parents. My wife has become less affectionate, and it feels like we're more like roommates than partners. Even though she's not as close to me physically, I've never cheated on her. I've always tried to be faithful, even though she used to suspect me of cheating earlier in our relationship. Her suspicions created some tension between us in the past, but I thought we had moved past that. Recently, she dropped a bombshell on me. She admitted that she had cheated on me. I was devastated and didn't know how to react. She suggested that we should try an open marriage, saying that it might help us rebuild our connection. She thinks that being open to seeing other people might bring some excitement back into our lives. I'm struggling with this idea. I can't imagine sharing my wife with someone else, even if it's meant to be mutual. I still love her and want to work through our problems, but the idea of an open marriage feels like a last resort rather than a solution. I'm not sure what to do, and I don't feel comfortable talking about this with friends or family. I feel like I'm stuck in a situation where I have to choose between my own values and saving our relationship. My wife and I have been together for about 10 years, and during most of that time, she rarely worked. If she did, it was usually because I found her a job or got her an opportunity through my connections. I made a significant effort to set up a well-paying career for her, which she started about 5 months ago. This is actually the longest she's kept a job. Before this, even when I was seriously ill and on disability leave due to a neurological condition, she didn't look for work. This was a few years into our marriage, and it was a tough time for us. We hadn't yet had kids, but we were already deep in debt, struggling to make ends meet. Despite the situation, she never seemed to consider finding a job to help with the finances. While I was dealing with my illness, I managed to earn some money by running a small side business from bed when I had the energy. It wasn't easy, but I did what I could. After I recovered, I got back on my feet, worked hard to establish a stable career, and managed to pay off all our debts. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I even took us on some trips. And for the first time in a long time, things seemed to be looking up. I thought we were in a good place, financially stable, and living a decent life. However, a few months ago, I found out that my wife had been secretly messaging an ex-boyfriend. She had been deleting the messages after each conversation, trying to hide them from me. It wasn't just a one-time thing either. She had been in contact with him for several months. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. About 18 months ago, I caught her doing something similar, likely with another person. I had my suspicions back then, especially when she traveled with a friend to another city. At that time, we were living abroad, and she called this guy's number late at night, around 2 a.m. When I confronted her about it, she claimed that nothing had happened, saying she just met up with an old friend. I tried to believe her, but the situation never sat right with me. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But recently, I started noticing more red flags. One day, I had to stay home from work because of a migraine, and I happened to see her messaging this same ex-boyfriend. She was offering him medication for his pain while completely ignoring my condition. It hurt to see that she was paying more attention to him than to me. During a national holiday, she decided to visit her hometown to spend time with her relatives, while I stayed back home to take care of our kids. During her trip, I noticed some messages suggesting that she had plans to meet up with her ex-boyfriend. When I confronted her about it later, she insisted that they didn't sleep together. But given how much she had lied before, I found it hard to trust her. She admitted that she was talking to him and that she had been deleting their conversations because she didn't want me to get the wrong idea. She promised to stop talking to him, saying she would cut off all contact. For a while, I believed her, but I soon discovered that she hadn't stopped. In fact, she was still messaging him regularly while we were both at work, and then deleting their conversations before coming home each day. When I confronted her again, she confessed that it had been more than just friendly chats, it was an emotional affair. She kept insisting that nothing physical had happened between them, and that she wasn't interested in being with anyone else, including him. But when I asked her directly if she had met him while she was back in her hometown, she lied again, saying she hadn't. I pressed her further, showing her some proof of their meeting, and she finally admitted it, saying she was sorry. She even tried to make up for things by suggesting I take a weekend trip as a thank you for taking care of the kids while she was away visiting her family. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was planning to meet up with her ex-boyfriend during that time. When I later tried to reschedule the trip, she became upset, which made me even more suspicious. It felt like she was trying to get me out of the way so she could continue her secret relationship. After I confronted her with the evidence, she apologized again and promised to stop. She said she realized her mistake and would no longer be in contact with him. But I later found more of her messages where she was still talking to him, saying things like, "I need time to think about this. It's not right to keep going like this." One of his messages even mentioned my kids. "You need to think about those too," he had written, likely referring to our twins. It broke my heart to see that he knew about my children, and I wondered how many times she had spoken to him about our family. Her reply was something like, "Maybe I can't see you anymore. You shouldn't come here." On the same day she had suggested I go on that trip, he had messaged her saying, "My flight is tomorrow morning." It made me realize that while I was away, she was likely planning to see him. I confronted her again, asking if she intended to bring him into our home, where our kids live. She swore that she never planned to have him over, and that she had told him not to visit. She claimed that they had only started talking recently, conveniently saying that their conversations began around the time I found evidence. After everything, she asked me to forgive her and even suggested that I could sleep with other women if I needed intimacy. She said she wouldn't be bothered if I did, but I told her that's not what I wanted. I wanted a committed relationship, a real marriage. After a lot of soul searching, I decided to forgive her and try to make things work for the sake of our 10 years together and especially for our kids. I told her that if anything like this happened again, I would end the marriage for good. But then, I discovered that she had started using another messaging app. She would install it whenever we were apart and delete it before coming home. This app was more private, and I had no way of seeing what she was doing there. I hoped that maybe it was just a coincidence or that she would stop on her own, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I gave it a few weeks, hoping things might change, but they didn't. Finally, I confronted her about the new app and asked if she was still talking to him. She denied it, saying she wasn't in contact with him anymore and that she only used the app to chat privately with friends. But I couldn't be sure, and she knew it. She was well aware that I had no way of accessing those messages, and it felt like she was hiding behind that knowledge. She might have been talking to someone else, or even continuing things with her ex, and I would have no way of knowing. I told her that I didn't want her to stay with me anymore. She didn't beg or cry. Instead, she asked if I would be able to handle taking care of our kids on my own. I told her I could. Honestly, I've been the more involved parent for a while, as she's often preoccupied with her phone. When she said that the kids needed their mother, I couldn't help but point out that she should have thought about that before making these decisions. She then suggested an open marriage, saying that if I wanted to see other women, she would be okay with it. She claimed that she was still committed to our family and that our relationship was strong, despite everything that had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was suggesting this arrangement just so she could keep doing what she wanted without feeling guilty. Now, I'm at a crossroads, struggling with what to do. Part of me thinks that the logical choice is to get a divorce, take care of my kids, and move on with my life. But love isn't always logical, and my feelings for her haven't disappeared, even with everything that's happened. And then, there's the matter of our children. I don't want them to grow up without both parents, and I know that separating would be difficult for them. But I also don't know if I can continue living like this, constantly doubting her, wondering if she's being truthful, and questioning if she's really committed to me or our family. Should I consider the open marriage just to keep our relationship alive, even if it's not what I truly want? Or should I put an end to this now and face the reality that our marriage might not be salvageable? I feel completely lost and don't know what the right choice is. I want a loving, warm, and loyal relationship. But looking back, I realized that our marriage never felt equal. She seemed to care as long as I provided for her, and she appeared loyal only when she could hide her secrets. Now, I just don't know if we can find our way back to what we once had.